Another important area, or an important area for Mike for Spokane, is the cost of utilities. The cost of basic services to the citizens and businesses living and operating in the city of Spokane. We have essentially a disincentive set up in Spokane that works against giving the individual ratepayers a good value. First and foremost is that the city adds a 25% utility tax. They provide the basic service and we pay for them, but they also get to tap the citizens and the ratepayers for another 25%. So naturally, the higher the cost of the utilities, the more money for the state agencies, or the city agencies, which isn't really what we want. We want lower costs of, that's why we have the city government, and that's why they provide the utilities, because we want to get good value. We want uninterrupted water and garbage and basic city services and amenities, but we want that at a good value. And it's very, very important to get it at a good value, because jobs and companies and opportunity they don't come to the place with the highest costs of basic service. They're looking for competitive costs of services. And there's two specific areas I want to talk to regarding utilities now, and that would be the water and solid waste. Now, over the years, the cost of water and conservation and the environment and water was a kind of a big deal. And to past administrations, there's a lot of political forces that are big on the environment and they want to regulate and tax, but they're not really giving us any better value. They're not conserving our resources. They're not making the planet safe at all. We have a lot of water here. Nobody wants to waste it, no one wants to abuse it, but we have a infrastructure. Our water system is decaying and failing. We're having water line breaks, and we've known this for a while, that this old cast iron infrastructure in place it's old, it's splitting, and we're losing. When I checked into it, and I'm not right up on the latest on city utilities, but from the last couple campaigns, we were losing 20% of our water load through leaking piping. And when it leaks like that, it undermines your roads, it undermines your infrastructure. And not only that, we're paying extra to move that much water, and then we're taxing it on top at 25%, when really we need to, before we do anything else, we need to fix these breaking water lines. It's the cost of the utility. A lot of money goes in to pay for these utilities, yet we're very high on our cost for it. We tax it a lot, and it's failing. And so it doesn't really matter if you have a leaky faucet or what you do for the environment. You're never going to save what the city wastes. And if you're truly concerned about the environment and conserving resources, then let's fix this infrastructure so we need less water. We don't waste less water. And some of this water getting away from the piping system can be very damaging to our roads. It undermines. It's a problem. It's been the last two campaigns we've had issues about this declining and aging a water line infrastructure, and we need to set to get that straight. And I don't think adding a 25% utility tax is helping us get this stuff replaced. That's the water. The other area is solid waste. Now, that was a big issue for me in previous campaigns, because the cost of solid waste, we were one of the top in the nation. Very, very expensive. This waste to energy plant is pretty much it's been a problem. Very, very expensive. And we really don't know environmentally what we're getting there. Now, in the past, we've had issues with unplanned releases and pink plume from radioactive materials. We just had emission issues that we could never fully track down. I found when we're looking into it years past that even the stack emissions testing being done by Waste Management, they'd run the test, and if the test came out negative or wasn't favorable, they would just keep changing the mix until they got what was coming out the stack was acceptable, and then Waste Management would pass that on, and that would go to the state. That's a problem for me. That needs to be, if it's running hot, it needs to, those results need to be what they are. That spot testing should not be administered by the operator of the plant. Now, some of that has changed now. The city's taken it over. I think Waste Management is getting booted out, which is probably good. But we still have issues regarding the operation of that plant. There's been no soil testing around it for years. They were running we paid for a carbon injection system that was supposed to help take the particulates out of the emissions, and they weren't even running that. I went to Clean Air Authority, I went to DOE, I went to all these various agencies, and I kept getting passed around till finally some of the Department of Ecology says it doesn't really matter what the waste energy plant does because it is considered to be an experimental plant and it's exempt from all Department of Ecology and EPA rules and regulations. That's nonsense. We don't, 25 years later, 30 years later, it's still an experimental plant? No. We should have some soil testing. We should know what's coming out the top of that stack. But also, the cost of this. We pay to process our garbage. When they built this plant, the cost of a modern landfill, energy extraction landfill, was about $1 a cubic yard. Same thing energy-wise. You bring your garbage, it cooks down, it gives off methane, they pipe off the methane, they use it as one of the cleanest burning hydrocarbons known to man. Now we have to handle everything, we burn it, carbon emissions blow out the top of the stack, it's probably the biggest carbon emitter or one of the carbon emitters in the county, and then we have political factions saying that climate change and global warming and carbon, and they want all these rules and regulations as corporations, but they won't even look at their own municipally run waste energy plant. You know, you'll tax private industry and say, oh, you can't emit carbons, but the city can just tool along burning this stuff, throwing it up in the atmosphere, and there's no questions asked. We don't know what's coming downwind. We don't know how much is getting into our plant life, and it's an aging plant. Long term, that isn't going to solve, for the next 50, 100 years, that plant is not going to solve our disposal requirements for city and business. I went around and talked to some of the agencies, and the cost of running this waste energy plant for the city was something like $70 million a year or more. I've been thinking it was $35 million for garbage and running the plant, and this will go up and down depending on the loads, and then the collections was $35 million, so it's like $70 million, and then there were still other things. So really, regionally here, we're spending $1 billion plus over 20 years easily. A lot of savings could come out of that if we ever really wanted to focus on efficient garbage disposal, but there's no incentive to do that because the waste management who was gaining from it and the people that are working for it working within the solid waste system, they don't want to answer to anybody, which is why the solid waste system is sort of falling apart. Now, I've been operating outside of the state, mostly Nevada, for reasons that Washington and Spokane have kind of driven me out of here. So I'm not quite up on what was happening with the solid waste system, but I'm pretty sure that Cheney, the Valley, Liberty Lake have all left this system. And they're going to handle their own garbage now, whatever way they do, and they're probably going to deliver higher recycling rates and lower cost of services for their citizens that we're not getting from the current management of the solid waste system. Even the recycling rates that this regional solid waste system widely quotes are kind of bogus. They claim 50-60% recycling, but the system itself probably recycles like 5% or less. What they do is they go to the system, and the way the Department of Ecology rules are set up, that any county can set up any recycling metrics they want, and you cannot compare them from county to county. It's not apples to apples. One person may be recycling glass, another may be doing paper, but you cannot compare those to the recycling rates. So one community may say 50% recycling, another one maybe claim 10 or 15% recycling, and the 10 or 15% recycling may be 3 times what the regional solid waste system is actually doing, but for marketing or for window dressing, they'll claim these very high recycling rates. If you take away all of the handling of materials that never had to do with the city of Spokane or the regional, and you took only what the city was handling themselves as a percentage of the revenue stream, it's probably around 5%. Previous administrations decided they needed a single stream recycling facility. It was going to be $25 million and was going to employ these people. And the last I looked at their stats, after they did that, the amount of recycling actually dropped like 4%. Where are we getting good value? We have another expensive process. We're not really recycling anymore. Most of the real recycling is handling in the private sector. The question I have is, if the private sector is recycling so much and more efficiently, and we're doing so little at such a high expense, why is the city in the business of garbage handling anyway? Not so much the collection, that's another issue, and the value we're getting as far as the cost of our collections. But the cost of these utilities determines how many people will locate here. I spoke to one of the superintendents or one of the maintenance people for Spokane schools. And they were trying to just haul their own garbage in the summer when there was no kids. And the city would not let them do that. He said they were losing $250,000, $300,000 a year for services they were not using, which over 10 or 20 years, that's a new elementary school, right? They have to pay that. It is a forced monopoly.